At Brand Secrets and Strategies, you learn how to save valuable time and money, where you learn strategies to get your products on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, empowering brands and raising the bar. Welcome. One of the biggest challenges that every brand asks, or every brand has, that they share with me is how do they get from point A to point B? How do you grow from being a small brand, a small kitchen brand, to something that's multi-million dollars in sales? How do you sell that brand? How do you get the right crew, the right people, the right support to be able to elevate your brand and explode sales? That's what today's podcast is about. On today's podcast episode, you're going to hear from Eric Skay, a master brand builder who's got an unbelievable resume of success behind him. He's going to talk about why focus and having the right team and the right strategy behind you is what you need to grow your brand. But there's a lot more to it than that, and we'll explain that more as we go through the interview. Do me a favor and help me raise the bar in industry and share this with any brand that you know that wants to grow sustainable sales. This episode's invaluable. You'll definitely want to pay attention to the end. As always, thank you for listening. This show is about you and it's for you. At the end of every episode, I always include one easy to download, quick to digest strategy that you can instantly adopt and make your own. Today, I'm going to share that with you at the beginning of the episode. During this podcast episode, Eric and I talk about why you need to have a 50% margin to really make your brand profitable. Well, one way to do that is to reduce your trade spending. In other words, get rid of the waste to make it more efficient. Today's free download is actually a cool tool, a tool that you can use anytime you want to evaluate your trade spending, a tool that you can use to assess different scenarios and identify what is the best strategy for you to maximize your ROI in your trade spending. You can get there on my website. There's a tab at the top called Trade Promotion Analysis Tool. I'll talk more about it at the end of the podcast episode, so you want to stay tuned. There are instructions on the site. If you've got any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them for you. Remember, the goal here is to get your product onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers. Now, here's Eric. Okay, so everyone, thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. Today is going to be fantastic. Today, you're going to hear from a master brand builder, Eric Skay. So why are we here? Well, my mission is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by helping you get your product on more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers, including online. I leaned into the pandemic and came up with this free webinar series because I realized the best thing I could do is help you grow and scale. And so by getting experts like Eric to come on and share his wisdom and his insights, this is invaluable because this is going to give you a leg up. The point here is that if you lean in and you leverage what you've got, the assets that you've got, this is your opportunity to shine. Let's get started. So, Eric, thank you for coming on today. Can you please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you're at today?
It's a long story, man.
That's okay. We got time.
I got you. I spent 30 years in this business. Started as a distributor with a van and a truckload of water. I was in Florida, and I figured it was hot and people would buy water in 1989, 1990. I was right. People did buy water. It was kind of, early in the bottle. It wasn't the beginning of the bottled water industry, but it was really early. And what I did also realize about 3 weeks in is if I didn't have any other brands, I would be out of business fast because I wasn't going to make it on just water. So I became the distributor in Orlando, Florida, when no one else wanted your brand. When absolutely everybody said no to you, you came to me. And I said yes. So opened up about, 600 and some odd accounts, and was fortunate enough during that time to pick up Arizona Iced Tea as a brand when it was brand new. Got them their first 7-Eleven authorization. Had to figure out how to route 212 stores. So it was like one of these situations, if you had a van and you would work for $80 cash a day, I would load your van and you would deliver 7-Elevens for me. Made it work. I walked into a 7-Eleven one day and the manager goes, "Sorry to hear you're losing the brand." "What do you mean I'm losing the brand?" They go, "Oh, well, the new distributor was just introducing themselves." So Arizona decided to go to someone bigger, which happens. Fortunately, at the same time, the Miller beer distributor wanted the water brand that I had. So the water brand bought me out. They bought out my company. And I ended up calling Arizona and said, "Guys, I just sold my company largely because of you. The least you could do is give me a job." So they did, and they moved me to Cleveland, Ohio. I had never been in Ohio in my life. I'd flown over it once, I think, going to Michigan. But Ended up getting that job, moved to Ohio, spent 3.5 years with Arizona Tea at a time when they went from, including the distribution time, call it 4.5. And they went from 0 to 500 million during that time. So it's a sink or swim environment. You're either learning or you're not. I remember being in Cleveland, and my first week there, they wanted me to call on BP, who at the time had 2,900 stores. And I was like, don't we have a national accounts guy? And Don says, you're the national accounts guy. Okay. Went and made the call. From there, I went to Hanson's for a short period of time. I'll call it my shoulda, coulda, woulda. Mark Hall recruited me from Arizona Tea. And at the time, they didn't have Monster. So everything that I was putting on the shelves was not working. It was just a miserable day. And I had gotten an opportunity to go to someone called Fresh Samantha. So I took the opportunity. Fresh Sam ended up scaling from 5 to 45 million under 3 years, in under 3 years, and sold to Odwalla. So for those who don't know the brand, it's now Odwalla. It was the East Coast of Odwalla at the time. Mm. So I had our own trucks, own distribution centers, and grew that brand nicely. From there, I ended up going to a 9-company roll-up, with Naked Juice being the primary brand that everybody would know. But it was Naked Juice, Ziegler's, Natalie's Orchid Island, Ultimate Juice, Ferraro Carrot Juice, Saratoga Water. I'd have to think of the other ones. We're getting down. Fantasia, which was Brad Barnhorn's brand, was one of the brands that roll up. And I ran. I was president. Ran half the country. We had our own distribution in several markets, and went direct in a lot of other markets. So learned quite a bit there. Then I owned a couple of my own brands, Iceland Spring Water, which I built from 2002 to 2008. It was the number 2 imported water in natural foods nationally, behind Fiji. So we did a good job in natural, did a lot of own label type stuff. So if you go into Walgreens today, you'll see Iceland Pure Water. I created that for Walgreens in 2004. It's still there today, so it's worked. You go in a vitamin shop, you'll see an Icelandic water. We created that for them in 2002. Had a lot of fun with that business. Also created an iced tea at the same time called New Leaf Iced Tea. Built that up, and unfortunately 08 happened. So I had 2 exits in 08. One in the water business, which was a good day, and then one in the iced tea business, which was a forced situation. Needed to figure out how to. I had in my entire net worth. I had mortgaged my house in that business. Had my child's college fund in, and he was in college. I have 4 children. He's the oldest, so had to figure it out. I ended up selling into a public shell and taking ownership, or a public company and taking some ownership, but did get some of my highest risk money off the table, which was only about 1/3 of what I had in, but it beat the alternatives. So I ended up running that company for a couple of years. Board wanted to go one way. I wanted to go another. I wanted to get it out of the public shell. There's a lot of complexity to public in terms of just all the reporting and the cost of doing business in a public shell, and couldn't get the board to go there. So I moved on and consulted for a 5-year period of time. And during that time, I got involved with some food brands. Food and beverage. I did 45 assignments in 5 years, and we did anything. Like if you wanted to sell your business, would figure out how to help you do that. Would put a banker in and then help guide people through the process. So a lot of fun doing that. And then I got a call from Rayo's, and it was because a banker and a lawyer who I was on the other side of on 2 transactions where I helped entrepreneurs sell their brands. Recommended me to the Rayo's people. And it was a cut in pay to go back to be a CEO of a company, but high profile. There was stuff going on within the company where it was on the front page of the New York Post. The shareholders were all suing each other, and a lot of turmoil. So during that time, I took the position and I had to do a complete turnover. But the only way I could get the shareholders to agree to move forward was to sell the company. So from August 26th, I want to say August 26th of, it had to be 17, maybe it was 16. I'd have to look back. But within 10 and a half months, we sold the company. And we sold it for a great value for the shareholders. They all did well. I transitioned the company for about another kind of 8-9 months. And then moved on to my next opportunity, which was Popcornopolis. Got to Popcornopolis, thought it was going to be a 3-year run. And Wally, the founder, said to me, "You ready for another 10-month run?" I said, "So what are you thinking?" He says, "Well, I think the time to sell is now." Wally's just at an age that he just wanted to get his chips off the table, to a degree, and kind of have some time to back to himself. So it ended up being exactly another 10 and a half month run. Here I've transitioned for a little over a year, and I finish up within the next week. So that's my story.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that. So let me ask you real quick, beverage versus food, which is easier?
I don't think any is easier, right? Okay. You know what? And it depends on what channel and what category in food. Like, I loved the pasta sauce business for its simplicity, and you knew exactly what channels you had to go after. You were going against grocery, and you were going against club mass. You weren't thinking about convenience. You weren't thinking about food service. At the time, and I'm talking about 4 years ago, the online sales were so low because of the weight of a case of pasta sauce that didn't even make sense to develop to any great degree. We had a little bit of it, but it just didn't make sense to really put a whole big focus on it. Whereas if you go into the snack business where I'm in now, you can go to every single channel. So it's very much like beverage in that sense. Snack and beverage parallel each other very, very well.
I loved being a DSD driver going way back. But I remember the guys who were carrying the beverages, man, their knees gave out early because that stuff's heavy. And so carrying a box of chips, no big deal. I could carry several at a time. Those Pepsi guys or, but whoever they were, God, that stuff's heavy. So I have great appreciation.
Our mutual friend, Michael O'Donnell, compares them and the 5-gallon bottled water drivers to athletes.
Oh yeah,
you kind of have to be.
Oh yeah.
It's the way he looks at it, and as a result, workman comp claims or workman comp costs are very high for those guys.
Oh yeah. But I could run a lot faster with you with a case of chips. Just kidding. No, I ran my butt off. But what the cool thing was I could wake up in the morning and I could decide how much money I wanted to make. And this is kind of where I'm leading into where I want to talk about today. The cool thing about being a DSD driver is you have that ability to impact your sales on a daily basis. And you have the opportunity to impact your sales on a micro level. Something I hadn't really thought about until I was talking to Brad Barnhorn last week. And yet those are the skills that help me get to where I'm at today. So as you're learning about DSD and about all those intricacies and working closely with individual retailers, how did you leverage that or parlay that into what you're doing today? How important was it?
Look, when you do what I've done over the last 30 years, you get a lot of experience in a lot of areas, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm more of a GM, general manager, but understanding your customer and being able to articulate that to, let me back up. So understanding who your actual end consumer is, and then being able to articulate to your customer, who is a chain, is really, really important. And I think that's more about, I think it's the most important thing. You've got to have a reason to be on the shelf. And too many people walk in and they go, well, I've got this great brand and I've got great margin. Michael and I actually talk about this, and they forget to tell the retailer what's in it for them, right? So, I think what I've learned is you've got to answer what I call the WIIFM, what's in it for me. And this goes back to the margin piece that we've talked about, and the need for 50 margins. If you think about this business, it's like the simplest, hardest business in the world. Why is it simple? I've got to put a box or a bottle on a shelf. How hard is that, right? But along the way, when you think about it, you've got to sell your broker, you've got to sell your distributor, you've got to sell a retailer, you've got to sell your sales staff. At the end of the day, you've got to sell an end consumer. And every one of those people wants to know what's in it for me. And typically that involves dollars, right? So you have to have the dollars and the margin structure to be able to support that. And if you don't, you've got to know that you can get there. So like I've had debates with people in the industry about, does EBITDA matter? And people will tell you, oh, go grow, and you're going to sell your company to Coke or Pepsi or you know, whatever for a whole lot of money, and you don't need to make money because they're going to make money. That is absolutely not true. It might be true if you're in the hottest plant-based space and you want to run in today's world, but if you're in pasta sauce or bottled water, that's not true, right? EBITDA matters because you got to be able to support that all the way along. And when you do eventually, want to sell your company, EBITDA is going to be one of the key drivers to drive the most. If you've got good EBITDA, you're going to drive a lot of value, particularly if you have it coupled with growth.
How would you define, what's an easy way for people to think about what EBIT is and why it matters?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of people talk about it. It's this huge, really scary term. But when you're talking about the valuation of your brand, how do you discuss it? Because
it's do you make money? I mean, this is where I get back to 50 margins. If you have greater than 50 margins, you're going to have EBITDA unless you don't have the piece that you're really good at, trade spend, under control. Because, we've all seen trade spends in that 25 range, and you're not going to make it if you got trade spends in the 25 range, right? Sure. High margins or having the pathway to get to a high margin is really, really important. And I can tell you just from experience, if you can couple high margin with good growth, it's the 20-20 rule. If you could have 20% growth and 20% EBITDA, you're going to sell your brand or your company for a whole lot of money. And if you can't get there, if you can show that you can get there to someone, there's value, right? And that's the magic of getting there. But the world's changed obviously in the last kind of 120 days, right?
Absolutely.
We've got COVID, we've got valuations coming down. So while my argument that EBITDA matters like a year ago was important, I think it's really, really important now because I think people are going to be cautious.
Well, and thank you for sharing this. Let's back way, way up. One of the things that you touched on, which thank you, because this is the area I focus on. One of the biggest areas I focus on is the customer. And the point is this, Eric, that a lot of the big brands spend a lot of their time talking at us. We're the best. We're the biggest. You need to listen to us because we're the best, but really providing no value. The opportunity that you have as a DSD driver, it forces you to be in the trenches working directly with your customer, your immediate customer, the retailer, and then helping educate them about who your end shopper is. And the reason I wanted to go here is because a lot of brands pay lip service to that. They generically think about who their customer is, who they're trying to serve. And yet my position is that retail's broken. And instead of looking at how do we extract as much margin out of a single product, we need to change that conversation to how does your consumer shop the store? And when your consumer's in the store, what are the things that they buy? And so the reason I wanted to go here, Eric, is I wanted to get your thoughts, first of all, about that, focusing on the market basket, the sum of all sales, but more importantly, how the end customer relates to that. And your job as a salesperson is to help the retailer appreciate and understand the value that that customer that your brand attracts drives to their store. Your thoughts?
Yes, I agree 100%. And it's funny because, if you look at 8451, the Kroger data or the Smart Team reports from Albertsons Safeway, they're highly focused on that. They want to know what customer, they've got to kind of, their different basket size customers, and they've got their best customers that are there the most, that spend the most. And you want to be in that bracket. with your brands. You want to be in that highest basket because they are paying attention to it. They're paying a lot of attention to it. So I recently looked at a report, and I won't say what brand, but I recently looked at a report where a brand was attracting the best customer. The average basket size was $74. I think that's like 20 or $30 more than the normal basket size. While the sales of that particular brand might not have the velocity of other brands, it was attracting their best customers. Their best customers were buying that product, so the retailer was highly interested in it.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's another thing I get into a lot. Big brands can buy velocity. So how many sales you have on the shelf? Again, the mindset that I'm trying to squeeze as much margin out of a single item. And traditional retail focuses only on that item and forgets about all the other products they have in the store. So when you're focusing on margin and I'm focusing on market basket, then you're looking at the overall product, overall, all the complementary products. So let me ask you this, because this is something that I see, and this is an area I'm trying to fix, that retailers tend to commoditize. Actually, everyone commoditizes the shopper, all male, all female, et cetera, without digging down into what that customer ideally looks like. In other words, you're talking about a pasta sauce, okay? Well, I can buy a lot of different pasta sauce. I can buy 2 for $1, the cheap stuff, et cetera, or I can buy the really high-end stuff. And what I'm getting at, Eric, is if I were to buy an organic, natural pasta sauce with all clean label ingredients, et cetera, and that customer that buys that probably buys it because they're more interested in the value that they get from that product. That customer, therefore, is far more valuable than the customer that buys Ragu or something like that. So how do you communicate that value, that incremental value, to the retailer? And then how do you help the retailer communicate that to their end customer?
So I think the retailer just leans into what's selling, right? But how do you communicate that as a brand? I mean, everything I've done in my life is premium. I'm in a premium popcorn business now. I was in a premium pasta sauce business before that. I was in a premium water business before that. Mm-hmm. If you were to take these categories, if you have your everyday, used Ragu, retailer probably makes 26 cents a jar on Ragu. I don't know that number to be true. I'm just saying they make a low number on Ragu. If you go to Cucina Antica or Arreo's, the retailer's making $2 a jar on it. Pretty simple story to go tell the retailer, provided you got some velocity. Mm-hmm. Now, in order to be able to get those type of dollars and that difference, you have to have the best possible product in your jar, your bag, your bottle, whatever it is. You're going to be premium. You got to be premium, and you got to give the consumer a reason to do it. So, as a brand, you've now got to create trial to reach that consumer to get them to try it. If your brand's the best, they're going to come back and buy it. Mm-hmm. Right. So
go ahead.
Creating trial is really important when you have that dollar difference. I haven't met a retailer that when you show them, as long as the margin's the same and they're making more dollars, they like more dollars. They like higher ring in the basket. It's really important to them. Right. So walking in and being able to tell that story of, I'm going to attract your best customer, and your basket size is going to be bigger because they're putting my jar in versus someone else's, or my bag of popcorn in versus someone else's. Retail is not going to argue with you on that. They just won't. But it's an important story to tell them. It's an important story to show them, because if you don't show them, they might not be thinking about it.
And so on that note, then how do you recommend, okay, I'm a young brand and I'm trying to figure out, how do I have that conversation? What strategies do you use? And the reason I wanted to go here, Eric, is if I'm trying to build a brand, how do I successfully build and grow that brand? So one, and then two, how do I communicate that to not only just one retailer, but every retailer? In other words, everyone on the sales team needs to be in lockstep, communicating the value of this product the same way and the same passion as the founder.
Oh, no, and that's absolutely true. And when you think about it, to go beyond that, you've got your sales team, but in a small team, you really don't just have your sales team. You have a broker team that, is your sales force out there. And they have a lot on their plate. They have a lot on their mind. So what makes you different? Well, you've got to think about what that is. And I go all the way back to my Arizona iced tea days, and I go, I think about how a guy named Mike Schott, that I learned this business from, put 311 distributors on in 11 months across the country. It was just a march across the country. And he had to get everybody lockstep in the same way. And I use the same technique today that he taught me there. You could ask anybody, and I mean anybody in the Arizona Tea organization or their brokers, what do you do at Arizona Tea? And if you couldn't answer it, you'd be gone that day. But the answer was, we put our brand on the shelf eye level next to Snapple. Very, very important, like who we were next to. We price it at 99 cents. And that's, you know, the Arizona Tea can. That's kind of the kiss of death. They've struggled to get out of that 99 cent price. We put 3 signs up on every store, and we identified where we put those signs. One at the cooler door, one on the front door, one at the register, right? Where you wanted it everywhere there was visibility. And we backed it up with quality service, right? So when I work with young brands, I try to figure out what their mantra is. What's their easy mission? Because, you know, those four things are really easy to remember. I could get a broker force to remember that. You know, years ago, before, you know, people had iPhones and computers, I remember I had one brand print business cards with their mantra on it that they handed out to their brokers. So it was just very easy. Here it is. In today's world, you can email it to them, you can send it to them a lot of different ways. But getting that mantra, understanding your brand, understanding what you want it to be is very, very important. Otherwise, someone's going to get it and they're going to make it what they want it to be. You're not directing them.
Exactly. And in fact, actually on that note, what's interesting is last summer, a lot of big brands reached out to me and started reaching out to me and asking me, how do you maximize the broker? How do you get the most from them? And it was interesting. A lot of people that I talked to, in fact, one of the podcast episodes talking to Madeline Hayden with Nut Pods, and her bottleneck she was sharing with me was, how do I hold my broker accountable? And I said, well, wait a minute. If I'm working for you and I'm not performing, you'd fire me, right? Yeah. Well, why don't you hold your broker to the same accountability? The point being, and this is why I came up with the free turnkey sales story strategies course, is you got to have everyone in lockstep. To your point, you've got to be able to carry out all the different things that you're supposed to do, KPIs, your merchandising, et cetera, to make sure that everything is being done correctly at shelf. What strategies did you use, first of all, to implement those and then hold people accountable? And the reason I wanted to go here is a lot of brands don't really understand how important execution is at shelf.
So I've done this right and I've done this wrong. You know, where when I say that, well, I've done it wrong. I've expanded too fast. I've went everywhere, and your message gets diluted because you can't reach everybody. So the key to this is creating what you want your brand to be, where you want your brand to be, how you want your brand to be positioned. Really, really dialing in and understanding that, and then picking a geography or channel and then owning that channel. And not going into 5 channels or 5 geographies or you know, whatever. I mean, when I look at the New Leaf thing when 08 happened, right? Things happen, right? You know, you had 9/11 happen. You had the crash of 2008 happen, right? We've got a pandemic going on right now, right? Things come up. And things come up that you don't prepare for. Like no one would have prepared for any one of those 3 things. They wouldn't have thought about it. I shouldn't say no one. Someone might have gotten a financial crisis, right? But you're not prepared for those things. So staying tight, focused, and keeping everybody, you know, knowing where you want to be, and then articulating that, and then inspecting what you expect. I mean, you know, it's just like you know, it was trust but verify, right? So I trust you to get it done, but I want to see it get done. So if your core is, I want to grow from Washington, D.C. to Maine, you're going to identify every chain you want to be in that area. You're going to identify where you want to be on the shelf, and then you're going to go work with your broker and kind of make that happen. Now, if you try to take that strategy as a young brand and do it across the country, you're going to get too diluted. But if you're within a 4-hour ride of yourself, you can get to any store to make sure it's going, you know, what's happening. And, you know, building relationships with your brokers. I know a lot of brokers now want to assign you one person and that's your kind of person that you go to, and you're not allowed to go to all the other brokers, well, I don't work that way, right? If I'm going to work with a broker, I want to be able to talk to the account rep at whatever account I want to go to directly. I don't want someone in between me, because then again, what happens? You're diluting the message. Every time you have someone between the founder or the head of sales or whoever it is and you. So when you have someone trying to direct traffic, well, how do you know that the person that they relayed the message to got it the way you wanted them to get it?
Exactly.
So it's important to be able to kind of and you can't manage a broker force. Even a smaller national broker has 500-600 people across the country. You can't reach them all. So you got to pick a geography. Hopefully it's the one you live in or where you manufacture, right? Because what does that do for you? Takes your travel costs down, takes your transportation costs down on getting the product to the shelf, right? Mm-hmm. Your logistics don't cost you as much. So, building in your backyard or wherever you're making your product becomes important as well.
And on that note, we were talking about a product that a company reached out to me recently. I was talking to Michael about this too. And so the company is in California. They have a distributor that put them in Florida, put them in Texas, in Louisiana, and in Indiana. Doesn't make any sense at all. This is one of the biggest challenges that I find brands run into, is that without understanding their business, without understanding their backyard, this is where you need to grow and succeed. This is where if you make a mistake, it's not as big a deal because you're right there and you can fix it or solve it or whatever before you start growing. And then those little mistakes become
hopefully you've created a relationship with the person you made the retailer you made the mistake at, where you can go in and say, okay, I didn't get that right. Work with me. Mm-hmm. Which you can't if you're all over the country. And the challenge, and I understand it, because this is where I say, I've done it right and I did it wrong. With New Leaf, I was like, I know the beverage business. I'm going to march this sucker across the country and open up 137 distributors in 38 states, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, 08 comes and my ability to raise money was pretty much gone. Mm-hmm. And my ability to control that was pretty much gone. Whereas when I take my New York distributor, who happened to be Manhattan Beer at the time, his first year out, he did 125,000 cases, was on track to 250 when things hit the fan. If I was just in that tight geographic area, we would have figured out how to navigate through that. Mm-hmm. But we were trying to support everybody, and you just can't. You can't get to that many people. So, look, lessons learned. So focus is important. Focus is one of the most important things. Understanding the geography. And the thing is, you learn from that focus. And, you're in Denver. If I can make something work in alfalfas in Boulder, well, there's likelihood that I can take those learnings and then go make it work in Whole Foods in that region. Mm-hmm. Or in natural grocers, right? So, and then once I make it work in natural grocers, well, guess what? Maybe now I can go down to Arizona and call on Sprouts, because now I've got a story and I know exactly what I've got to do. And I can go in and take those learnings from alfalfas and say to the buyer at Sprouts, hey, here's what I've learned. Here's where my brand works. And, the other thing I think about, it's funny where I go back to the Arizona iced tea days. With that mantra, part of it was an eye-level shelf. Well, we wanted a full shelf of product. If the store would only give us 2 facings, we told the store, thank you, but we're not going to take the business. Because we knew we couldn't succeed without the billboard. So you have to be willing to say no to business. And this is where it becomes hard. This is why the one you mentioned who's got business in Indiana and Florida, yet they're in California. You're hungry for business. You're just getting started. Someone comes to you with you get excited. You're like, boom, I'm going to go get that sale. And when you and I were talking the other day, like I think about this business, and it's hard, and you really got to learn. And that's why you want to learn small. And I go back to Iceland Spring, where I sell my first truck. I'm excited. It's a $16,000 sale. It's to UNFI. And I had taken that brand over for someone who had started it like a year before. And I didn't realize the trade spend that they had going on and everything they're going on. So my wife was my accountant at the time. Her and I worked together for almost 17 years off and on. And she calls me up when the check comes in and she goes, I got good news and bad news. I'm like, well, what's the good news? She goes, well, we got the first check from UNFI. I go, well, what's the bad news? She goes, the check was for $12.31. And that was on a $16,000 order, right? But there was all this old trade spend and stuff that accumulated that they decided they were going to ding on that check. And like, lessons learned. You go small, you go within your own geography, you can manage all of those. You can even manage your trade spend. You're not like distant from it. You're not relying on your broker without you being with that broker all the time to manage that trade spend. You're doing it yourself. So tight focus, really, really important. And it's really important when you come back to like maximizing value, as we've talked about. If you have a brand that can do well in grocery, mass, convenience, food service, so on and so forth, pick your channel, prove it. When it's time to go maximize value and maybe sell your company, pick another channel and prove that it works there, but same thing, like starting all over, go very, very tight geographically. Leave that growth for the next guy who's gonna buy it, but prove it can work there. Right? If you have a brand that can go multi-channel, multi-category, right? Don't go into 5 different categories. You don't want to be in a beverage and a sauce and some brands have that expandability. Show the people that they can get there, right? Like prove that you can get there. Find the co-packers, but don't try to go do it all, right? Because again, you're diluting. The more you dilute focus. If you have a miss when you dilute focus, it's going to hurt your brand value. So you want to prove it on a very, very small level, but that leaves growth for the next person who takes over to go grow if you've proved it in just smaller territories. So I try to stay focused in everything I do.
Well, thank you for sharing, because you're right. It's so critically important. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. That's why I was so thrilled that we're going to be able to talk. Here's the challenge I run into when I mentioned that, I don't think I mentioned this time, but I've worked I've had the privilege of mentoring and working with hundreds of brands from pre-revenue all the way up to multi-billion dollars in sales. And the thing that I find that's true amongst most of them is that they're not experts in everything. The more you know about your brand, the more you understand your brand, and that begins with understanding your customer. And the more I believe a brand should keep their hand on the rudder of their ship, then you can start driving those decisions. And where I'm going with this, Eric, is that unfortunately in this industry, we spend a lot of time teaching people how to raise money, and then we teach them how to raise money, and then we teach them how to raise money, and then we teach them how to raise money, and then we tell them to go hire a broker. And brokers are good and bad, just like every other profession, but they don't necessarily have your best interest, and they might be even supporting your competition, or they may not be experts in your customer and your brand, et cetera. And so in that scenario, being able to say, here's where I want to grow in my backyard. These are the stores I want to be able to grow in, et cetera, and then hold that broker accountable. That, in my mind, is the best way to do that. And to go one step further, this is where you have a scorecard that holds them accountable. I talk about this a lot in podcast episodes, et cetera. And then you use KPIs, which are the guardrails. So when you were saying that you had it's a pretty bold statement to tell a retailer, look, we don't want your business unless we can have a billboard. You had a reason for that. And so how did you identify what those KPIs are, those key performance indicators? And then how did you leverage that within your sales team and then at retail so that your product, Arizona Tea at the point, had the right product placement, the right shelving, the right signage, the right everything else, so that the brand could thrive and grow? Because if you hadn't done that, I guarantee you wouldn't have done anywhere near as well as you did.
So Arizona Tea was a demanding place, and they demanded a lot of their employees, and they demanded a lot of their distributors. So it's a bad example, and I'm not sure you can get away with it in today's world. You know, we used to walk into our distributors and say, we want 95% non-chain distribution in the first 30 days. And people would look at us and go, I have cores, and I don't have 95% distribution in my non-chain accounts. But really, it was build the independent, build the independent. The independent would bring the chain to you, and you wouldn't have to pay the slotting dollars because you'd have built
I like
demand
that idea.
for your right. So, and it worked. I mean, it worked in a big way. But we were bold and we asked for things, and I'm serious. Everybody looked at me like I had two heads when I walked in their distributorship. But that said, at the same time, I'd be out on a Saturday resetting shelves, putting glide racks in, getting it, showing it, and there, what the way I made it work, and this was I worked with a guy named Len Ganley in R.L. Lipton in Cleveland, Ohio, distributor of all other distributor at the time. So he didn't have Bud, he didn't have Chorus, he had all other, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't have Miller, but Len and I set up what I'd call a showcase route, and we went out and made a route look beautiful. And then we held the salespeople accountable to execute against that showcase route, and do the same thing we've done there. And like I said, the fact that I was out on Saturday and Sundays building that showcase route went a long way with the rest of the sales force, because you were out there showing.
Well, leading by example. So thank you. That's a great story. And this is, I think, gets back to one of the things that we're talking about in terms of retail execution. A lot of brands say, hey, you need to go out and do this. And they don't really explain what this is or what the display should look like, or how it should be merchandised. So that's a really good idea. So how did you come up with that? And then how do you feel it helped overall with the business and your relationship with the retailers?
I'm not taking any license in coming up with it. I mean, I'll actually tell you a quick funny story. I built the showcase route. Mike Schott, who was my boss at the time, says he's coming to Cleveland to see me. Now, Mike happened to know Cleveland, and I didn't have the whole thing done yet. Yeah. So I pick up Mike at the airport, and I'm driving over to the showcase route because, of course, I want to show him my best work. And Mike says, no, we're not going there. Let's go turn here, turn here, turn here. And he takes me to, like, stores that are selling cigarettes as Lucy's, right? Like, and Arizona Tea was in every one of those stores, but it wasn't set right. It wasn't done. He went to 4 stores. He asked me to take him back to the airport. So I took him back to the airport. He was supposed to spend the day with me. Yeah. He went into the airport. He got on a phone, and at the time you had voicemail. So he voicemailed the entire Arizona team and said, "Good morning, Team Arizona. This is Mike Schott. I just toured the market in Cleveland." Now, he went to 4 stores. Just toured the market in Cleveland, and the market sucks. No reflection on Eric. I invited him back 30 days later. And every single store looked like my showcase route.
There you go.
So, I mean, you learn. I would think I was 28, 29, and it was a rough lesson. And I had been there a month. I had done my job, but I didn't have my job 100% done. And this was the type of expectation that was set by this leader, that you were going to go build, and you were going to get your distributors and leverage them and tell them that same four-point message, of price, position, point of sale. It's pretty simple stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And you were going to execute it, and the expectation was there. And, a lot of people didn't live. They didn't make it. People lasted less than a year in that environment because they couldn't do it. I lasted well more than that because I chose to learn. But what was great about it is the people who left weren't bad people. They just didn't like that type of style or environment. And the amount of people that left, I created this giant network for myself across the country of people who left Arizona and went somewhere else. It was actually pretty good.
Well, and on that note, those are the bosses that you hate them when you've got them, but those are the bosses you learn the most from. I was a grocery manager at Price Club years ago, well before it became a Costco. And my boss, great guy, but we'd walk the floor every single morning, and he'd say, "How much of this did you sell this week, yesterday, week before, last week?" I had to know all my numbers. Why did you put this on an end cap? How much is coming in? What do you anticipate the sales to be? What do you think the margin's going to be? This is back before we had a lot of the sophistication that brands have today, retailers have today. But yet I learned so much from him, and it helped me throughout my entire career. So thank you for sharing, because that is, again, the reason I do what I do, the reason that we're having this conversation, Eric, is how do we help the brands that are listening avoid some of these mistakes that every brand falls into. And so if they can learn from that, I think that gives them an edge. So as you're talking about that and you built the network, talk a little bit about how that was relevant. Why was that important? And were you able to leverage that later? And the reason I wanted to go here is what's interesting about this industry is you keep bumping into the same people periodically. And yet there are people out there in this industry that can really help you explode your growth, take your business to the next level and beyond. For example, bumping into you and having that opportunity to learn from you and then connect with the people that you have in your network.
Well, I see. So, Dan, that's a good point. And earlier on, you made the comment that brand owners don't know everything. And the good brand owners, the people that really, really go far in this place, are the people who identify what they do really well. And they do that really well. Uh-huh. And then they bring in people around them that can do the things they can't do well. So bringing in a guy like you, bringing in someone like a Brad Barnhorn on a board, and working with a founder, back when I was consulting, bringing in someone like me to help on the business strategy plan and that focus. What is that focus? How are we going to win? Because, sometimes you come out with a product and it's not right and you have to pivot. So that's why focus is really important, because if you're all over the place, you can't pivot, or your pivot costs you a whole lot more money, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't always know. You may have an idea of who your consumer is for your brand, and you might be wrong, and you might get it on the shelf and find out that you have a completely different consumer. You're all over the place. It's very difficult to react to. If you're tight, you're focused, you can react to that. But I do think knowing who you are, what your best strengths are, leaning into those strengths, and then bringing in people around you to help is important. And we happen to have an ecosystem here with there's a lot of advisors out there. There's a lot of really good advisors out there. So you can always find the help for what you're not good at, right? And that's how you're going to leverage those folks' relationships. Because if they're good advisors, I mean, I can tell you, if I work with someone, my Rolodex is open. Whoever they need to be in touch with that I know, I'll put them in touch. And how does that work with you? You talked about it. If I have to think about a chain or a distributor, I don't have to sit there and cold call anybody anymore. I'm sure I have a friend that knows that person. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm probably 1 degree of separation away from anybody I need to get to in this business, right? Where I wasn't when I started here. I probably wasn't 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but now I'm probably at that point where I'm, about 1 degree of separation, maybe 2, but 2 would be a stretch to get to anybody that I need to get to. Whereas if you're a young entrepreneur, you don't have those contacts. So you bring in the advisors around you that do.
And surround yourself with quality people. So thank you for sharing that. And this is what I always say, this is what makes a natural. The point is that there's so many talented, qualified people out there. And that's why I do what I do with these free webinars, to expose people to experts like you to get these insights. Because, one of my favorite sayings, we used this last week with Brad Barnhorn, is if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a team. And it's that team that you surround yourself with. And my next question, or my next thing I wanted to focus on, how do you know you're getting the right people? And as a master brand builder, this is the secret sauce. This is the magic of what makes you stand out, because to your point, you can't possibly know everything you need to know about everything in business, et cetera. But how do you identify the very best people to surround yourself with so that you can take a brand and explode their growth? Or as you said, take people at exit. How do you develop the team to help you achieve that goal?
So it's really important. I mean, you start with your core team of someone you know and trust, right? So you're going to bring in people that at least me, I'm going to bring in people that I've worked with in the past, that I've trusted, that have executed for me in the past. Mm-hmm. And then I don't really have to worry. You go to the next step, it becomes difficult because everybody you hire, hiring mistakes will be made. Mm-hmm. That's it. You got to find out if you made a hiring mistake, you have to address it quickly. And you have to determine now what hiring mistakes when I make a hiring mistake, I consider it my mistake, so I will develop that person if they can be developed. If they can't be, then I made a hiring mistake and it just wasn't right. But if I made the mistake, it's my obligation to develop the people. But it goes back to like it's the old adage. You hire people who are motivated and you train them for skill. So as long as you can bring people in that really, really identify with you and the passion that you have for your brand, and they have the same, I think you can train them and teach them the skills to get there. And a lot of times, passion, belief, and commitment will overcome experience. Right? I go back to my Fresh Samantha days. When I went to Fresh Samantha, they had gotten to about $3-4 million in sales, and they did it by hiring people. They were based in Maine, so they would sell in delis, bagel stores, things like that. My best guy they found in a bagel store. To this day, he runs the DSD operation in the Carolinas. The guy ended up being the best in the business, but I used to say, look, if I cut that guy, he'll bleed juice, right? We sold juice. I said, he'll bleed fresh cement. We hired for passion. He didn't have the skill, but he believed in the brand. So when you can hire people who believe and surround yourself with people around that have some level of skill in whatever they're doing, you can build on that and train them, and let their passion will overcome. Their passion for the brand will overcome whatever skill deficiency they may have.
And I work with a lot of different brands, and I help them in hiring or choosing the right people for category management and help them identify who those people are. Not hiring specifically, but I always say hire someone with a CSI mentality. That TV show used to be really popular, and I'll teach them the skill. To your point, that is so critically important because a lot of people overlook that. You think you can just go pick one off the shelf and they're ready to go. The thing I want to applaud you, though, for, and this is something I don't hear, unfortunately, a lot of brands, is that you took ownership for your decision to hire that person. Instead of just hiring them and saying, well, you didn't work out today, or maybe you didn't button your shirt the right way, or whatever, you're gone, working with that person and giving them a fair shot and trying to help develop them. And one of the things I've been focusing on a lot, Eric, recently, is that with this pandemic, a lot of people are thinking about getting rid of people or cutting headcount. I think that's the biggest mistake, because you spend all the time hiring and developing and training people, and yet now you're trying to cut people so that you can get your budget right. But yet there are a lot of other ways, like trade marketing and more efficient, drive your business in your backyard, et cetera. So I know that you've got a hard stop, and I want to respect your time. What are the strategies?
People
Okay.
People are an easy one, right? For companies. So that's where they tend to go, because it's harder to do anything else.
True.
Right. But if you cut your people, what ends up happening? You cut people, you end up with morale issues with the people you have left, because they're like thinking, okay, when am I next? So you're not getting productivity out of them. So if you can avoid the cut at all costs, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you got to cut, you got to cut. If you're overweight on, if you got too many people, you got to cut. But if you don't, if you have the right number of people, you just got to figure out how to deploy them to grow the business profitably versus cutting.
True. Well, but developing, and that's another thing I think I love about, one of the things I love about this industry, and again, the reason why we're doing this is how do you develop those people? So the people that are listening, that listen to this now and in the future, hopefully they're in a position where they're saying, you know what, I could develop myself. I could develop other people around me. I've got to believe that if I worked for you, my job, my responsibility is to make you look like a hero, to learn your job and become very proficient at it so I can help push you up the ladder. And I believe as a boss, my job is to develop, reverse the other way, my job would be to develop you and to help you along and help you to grow. And the point is, this mutual situation, this collaborative approach makes a more robust workforce. And one of the things that I, the greatest compliments I've ever had was that I worked for some people that said that I forget exactly how they put it. My greatest strength was I was able to make my idea their own. And the point being is that I was able to help guide them. I didn't take the credit for it, but I gave them the tools and the resources and allowed them to grow and thrive on their own. So how do you leverage a strategy like that, assuming you do?
I when you're talking about just developing people, it's important to give people the tools to succeed, to guide them. And if you have someone that's motivated, they're gonna get there. I mean, I have a guy in our popcorn company now. He ran our DSD division, right? We deliver ourselves to some stores. It's a small division. I wanted to teach him convenience. He knew the brand. He was motivated. He got it. He didn't understand convenience, but he did understand DSD, which, is the basis of this business, as you've talked about earlier. So in the last year, we built a convenience store business from scratch where we have the hardest working SKU in convenience. We've only got 6% ACV in the West, but we have the -- hardest working SKU, which he was motivated. I developed him. And look, it took a meeting every day at sometimes. It took a meeting every week, to sit down and go, okay, here's the problems I face. What do I do? And I've got the experience to tell him what to do. And he was smart enough to execute against what I told him. So a lot of times it comes down to the dynamic of people, but you got to spend time developing people and giving them the tools to win, getting them their answers when they don't understand.
Great story. And to go one step further, and this is why this matters, everybody, is because you will build upon that. Once you start getting that momentum, then 6% becomes 10%, becomes 15%, et cetera. And you can replicate those success stories in other channels and other markets, which brings everything we've been talking about back around. So I know you've got to go in a couple minutes.
I'm sorry. I want to mention one thing because I think it's important, and I think it goes back to what you do. I've always been pretty good at reading data. So I get in, I'll dive the data, and I never had a whole lot of value on what I'll call, you call it category management, I call it performance management, right? Mm-hmm. And my last 2 roles, I have had people who were way better than me in data, and they would find nuggets that I would never find. And when you go in and can sell a story, I don't care if it's one store. If you have a data story versus I have the best brand, you're going to win every single time. So as you think about, as an entrepreneur thinks about their team, getting someone, even if it's outsourced, that can mine that data and come up with the nuggets, I think is one of the most important things, because the days of selling without data are gone.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, and that's why I love what I do, because it's that advanced storytelling. It's fact-based selling. So category management, really, from my perspective, Eric, is fact-based selling. It's gotten a sort of, it's a nebulous term to a lot of other people, but the point is, how do you leverage those insights? And one of the things that frustrates me, we've talked about this a little bit, is that the data is not coded around the way your customer shops. It's not coded, or it's not put together to really define what's really going on in sales. So that's actually why I'm going to do that next webinar in about an hour, and there's a replay on Saturday. I'm going to redo it on Saturday, but thank you for sharing that, because at the end of the day, the thing that makes natural are the ingredients, the people, et cetera. And if we can help this channel succeed and thrive, this is the opportunity that I believe to change our food system. If we can make it easier for smaller brands to succeed by teaching them the skills to hire the right people, to develop the right people, et cetera, then that's a game changer. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I really appreciate you for coming on. Any other thoughts?
No, I really appreciate questions. You having me on, and
thank you.
That I can't stress the importance of, to your point, fact-based selling.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, okay, we got a couple of quick questions. If you need to drop off, that's okay. I can answer them. So, okay. So, What are the differences between health food stores and regular store chains? Okay, so the way that I would answer that, get your 2 cents, Michael, Eric, excuse me, is that a health store, a natural store, natural doesn't mean anything. But when you think of a Sprouts, a Whole Foods, or something like that versus a Kroger, a Winn-Dixie, or something like that, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, a natural food store. I the line's changing because years ago Whole Foods was a natural food store. Now I'd say it's more of a specialty food store. So I break things down into kind of specialty, natural, and alfalfa to me is a natural food store. So,
Yeah.
but to your point, a conventional grocery store like a Kroger or a Albertson Safeway is not. What's funny about that, though, is the reason the line's so blurred. If you built in natural years ago, it took you 5 years to get to conventional. Now it takes you about 12 months because the conventional food stores realize how big the channel's gotten, and
Mhm.
they do not want to leave it to the natural food stores. So once they see something happening, they're jumping on much quicker than they used to be.
And here's the best part. Thank you for sharing that. Because the big stores, I mentioned before, a lot of brands tend, or a lot of retailers tend to commoditize the customer. For example, in their world, the Aloha shopper is someone who eats a couple salads and goes for a walk. In my world, that's someone who's trying to reduce their carbon footprint and a bunch of other things. And if you can help that help that retailer understand what's unique about that customer, that's your opportunity to really grow and scale. Kevin says, thank you. This is really helpful for those of us taking baby steps. Uh, Kevin, thank you so much for your comment. If you've got more, by the way, if anyone doesn't get their question answered, reach out to me. I put my email address on the chat. So thank you for that. And then Mark says, when building the brand, at what point do you start interviewing for brokers? Honestly, I'd like to get your take on that, Eric. My thought is, first of all, you need to have a solid strategy in place before you start working with a broker. And the reason for that is a lot of brokers are going to try to tell you what to do. This is your brand. This is your baby. Your name's on it. You need to be able to direct and guide them and hold them accountable to your success. Eric, your thoughts?
I would 100% agree.
Okay.
I see people get excited that they got a broker and they think the broker's going to solve all the problems and tell them exactly what to do and then go do it for them. Not going to happen. You've got to
No.
go in with your broker, with your roadmap, and here's my roadmap, and here's what we want to do. Going back to your earlier question, you got to have a clear roadmap. You've got to articulate that roadmap to the broker, and then you've got to make sure he stays on the road.
Exactly. Well put. And on that note, one of the things that Michael and I have been talking about, our mutual friend, is that you should have a business plan that's so robust and so complete that someone can come in and execute on your behalf in your absence. And you've got to have a broker that can fit into that role as well. By the way, there are good brokers and bad brokers. So interview a bunch of them. Don't just interview one or take one and just accept the first person that comes along. Make sure they're a good fit. Make sure that you can get what you want. Like Eric said earlier, if they're not going to let you talk to the people that are actually at the store level, well, if that's important to you, then don't go with that person. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, Mark. And then someone said, where's the e-commerce business going today? Honestly, the e-commerce business is here to stay. By the way, Eric, if you've got to jump, I understand. Please,
I do have to jump. I apologize, but
no,
thank
well,
you for
that's
having
fine.
me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know that's I've gone over, and I know you've got a call. So, thank you so much, everyone. I answer your questions in a second. So, anyhow,
All right.
thanks, Eric. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our next conversation. Okay, so so e-commerce is here to stay. So, what I mean by that is that e-commerce is, first of all, your brand needs to be available wherever your customer shops. Your brand has got to be available where if your customer walks into a store and they can't find your product, and that's a mistake on you, then that's a reflection of your ability to not support the brand, and I'm talking about out of stocks, et cetera. E-commerce should be a critical pillar to every brand's success strategy. And if you've got a robust e-commerce strategy, one of the things I talk about a lot in trade marketing, et cetera, is how do you leverage it to grow traditional retail? And the reason that's important is because then you're getting the best of both. So e-commerce is going to continue to grow. Because of the pandemic, it's made it a lot easier for customers to experiment and buy staples and things like that through e-commerce. Your job as a brand, though, when you're talking about traditional brick and mortars, how do you help that brand, how do you help that retailer that you're working with become relevant or remain relevant to their customers? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please let me know. But what I'm trying to say is that give the retailer a reason to help them give their customers a reason to keep coming back time and time again. So thank you for that. And then how do you evaluate the general? How valuable do you gentlemen enhance TPM? Okay, trade spending. You know what? I'm actually going to be talking about trade spending and KPIs in just about an hour. So, Tom, if you're able to show up to that, let me know. So, okay, let me answer your question. Traditional strategy is that you just write checks. You buy every promotion. That's what everyone wants you to do. Unfortunately, trade marketing has become a profit center for distributors and for retailers. One of the reasons we don't have as many distributors as we used to, even the big brands, is because, okay, so Tom, that's actually in the chat. So it's my website, my short version of my website is cmsforcpg.com/trade ROI1, which is at 11 o'clock, and trade ROI2. So thank you for asking that question. So the answer to your question is, when Eric was talking about a 50% margin, there are two ways to get it. One, raise prices. Two, sell more, and raise prices. And the second is a lower cost. Well, you can't always do that. And if you're a healthy brand, you should not have to apologize for having quality ingredients in your product. So I am absolutely against trying to lower prices to the point where it chokes you out of business. So the next thing to do is to look at your trade marketing. If I can help you leverage your trade dollars, get you more trade dollars back in your pocket, that's going to help you grow and scale your brand. And the reason this matters is because that's how you can grow and scale more effectively. That's how you make your brand more attractive to retailers. That's how you make your brand more attractive to venture capitalists, other investors as well. In other words, if you're think about a Shark Tank type environment. If you have the ability to tell the sharks, nope, here's what I need, and here's why I need it, and stick to your guns, because you know how valuable your brand is, that puts you in a position where you can negotiate more effectively. That puts you in a position where you can control how your brand is represented at shelf. If you can control the valuation of your brand, that's going to give you more runway to grow sales. That's going to give you more runway to support important causes. I hope that helps. If anyone can show up to that, I appreciate it. That'd be great. Just a quick little taste. I've got a free trade promotion calculator, trade promotion ROI calculator to put on my website. Anyone can use it anytime. I'm going to go deeper into this. This is one of the areas people have been asking me a lot about. And so I'm going to start talking about how I'm going to help all of you become experts in trade marketing. And it's a lot more difficult than buying a piece of software and pushing a button. There are a lot of things that those tools, those resources don't cover. So does anyone else have any more questions for me? Anything else I can ask? I'm here if you need me. Thank you so much for showing up. If you've got additional questions, reach out to me, dan@cmsforcpg.com. Kevin, thank you. I appreciate thank you for your note. Thank you. And so, I'm here for you. The reason I've got the podcast, the YouTube channel, all the content is to help you confidently grow and scale your brand. Leverage it. And do me a favor and share that with others in the industry and help them take advantage of it. Thank you, Mark. Okay, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And hey, everybody, thanks. Have a great rest of your day. I want to thank Eric for coming on today and for sharing his wisdom and his insights. And I'll be certain to put a link to Eric's LinkedIn profile on the podcast show notes and in the podcast webpage. As I mentioned, today's free downloadable guide is actually the cool tool. There are instructions with it, so I'll put a link to it in the podcast show notes and on the podcast webpage. The bottom line is this. The push button strategies that you're probably relying on aren't going to help you identify, aren't going to help you maximize your trade promotions. In many ways, they're really nothing more than just QuickBooks for your trade spending. In other words, a way for you to keep track of what you're spending. It doesn't help you analyze the promotion, and they don't help you assess what promotions make the most sense. This tool is something that you can use to evaluate not only what makes sense for your brand, but how can you grow and scale your brand incrementally. You can learn more about this free tool on my website, and there are instructions on how to use it. I've made it really super simple. This is my way of giving back, so take advantage of it. You can get there by going to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 197. Thank you as always for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.